Hi, this is Scott. I really appreciate our sponsors because they make the show possible. Today's show is sponsored by Developer Express. Become a UI superhero with Dev Express controls and libraries. Deliver elegant.NET solutions that address customer needs today. By leveraging your existing knowledge, you can build next-generation touch-enabled solutions for tomorrow. You can download your free 30-day trial at dx.hanselminutes.com. That's dx.hanselminutes.com.
From hanselminutes.com, it's Hansel Minutes, a weekly discussion with web developer and technologist Scott Hanselman. This is Lawrence Ryan announcing show number 438. In this episode, Scott talks with Dr. Kortney Ziegler, creator of Trans H4CK.
Hi, this is Scott Hanselman. This is another episode of Hansel Minutes, and I'm chatting today with Dr. Kortney Ryan Ziegler. Dr. Ziegler is based in Oakland and has a wide body of artistic and academic work focusing on queer and trans issues, and is the founder of this amazing new thing called Trans H4CK. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Thanks. So you've got not just a PhD in African American Studies, but in fact the first person to get a PhD in AA Studies from Northwestern.
Yep.
Does that mean that it was the beginning of that program, or did you help design that program? How does that work?
Yeah, I was in a PhD in 2005 at University of Illinois, and I wasn't feeling that program. And at the same time, Northwestern was, developing their PhD. They had an undergraduate degree in African American Studies at their school, but they were becoming the 7th program in the country at that time to develop a PhD, doctoral level studies. So I threw my hat in the ring and decided to apply, and I was part of the first cohort. There were 5 of us accepted in 2006. Mm-hmm. And I crossed the finish line in 2011.
That's fantastic. And you've been online and kind of in the online space for years now, over 10 plus years. You had a popular blog going back as far as 2003. Mm-hmm. Did that blog, was that your first foray into the online space?
No, I think I tweet about this a lot, but I was a child of like the 1990s .com thing happening, right? So I got my first computer when I was 15 and was chatting on AOL and Prodigy and all of those things, and taught myself how to develop web pages through the internet and all the AOL discs that I would get in the mail. So I guess that would be my first foray into like online life, developing this profile. And not only that, but finding people and connecting with people and building relationships over the years, and how these identities have shifted as different technologies have emerged, right? Shifting from AOL to Prodigy to Friendster, I remember, then MySpace, and everybody's aging, but we're aging through social media. So, and then, once I got addicted to the internet, I just never stopped. And when I was in graduate school, one of the things that helped me a lot was putting my work online and connecting with other scholars who felt some sort of isolation in the academy, or just felt that they weren't smart enough to be there, or whatever they felt, and needed some sort of connection. So I felt that way and started blogging, and my blog became extremely successful and won multiple awards and things like that. And I stopped blogging in 2006 because I was entering my doctoral studies at Northwestern. So it was great. I remember being part of, I guess, what would, a dated word, feminist blogosphere, right? That's what it was called, in the early 2000s. And it was great, connecting with all these women and queer folks, and writing articles before think pieces were like the official thing to do. We have blog carnivals and all kinds of awesome stuff. So
yeah, this was really on the forefront. Your blog was called Blackademic. Yeah. And it seemed like it's really the beginning of academics getting online. And I think your point there that people felt disenfranchised by academia itself, and went online to create their own academic circle for deep think pieces and analysis online.
Exactly.
And you were one of the first people to do kind of grassroots funding. Again, all these things that we take for granted in 2014, when you went in 2000, I think it was 2007, 2008 to do your first film. You and your producer went online to do to get your funds.
Exactly. Thanks for bringing that up. But I follow the method what other Black queer filmmakers have done before me, which is, Kickstarter before there was Kickstarter. Crowdfunding locally, amongst your community and your friends and activists and things like that, because they want to see the story to be seen, right? So I used Blackademic to crowdfund for Still Black. I shot maybe a 3-minute, like really just basic trailer, of a Black trans man. His name is Ethan Thomas Young, and he lives in Ohio, and shot his little interview, whatever, and put it on the internet and was like, I'm trying to raise money for this film, and if you contribute to my film, you will be credited in the credits forever for, contributing to history. And there weren't any perks or anything like that. It was just like, no matter what you donate, you will be credited because this is important, hasn't been done before. And we raised a significant amount of funds to have the film complete. And if you watch it today, it still has all the list of all the funders who really helped to make history, from $5 to $1,000 to $2,000. People really put out of their pockets to help make this film. So,
wow. So a bunch of little associate producer
exactly.
Credits. And this is in, like you say, almost 7-8 years ago now.
Exactly.
And that, of course, went on to win a number of awards for Best Documentary and at film festivals.
Mm-hmm.
And as you're looking at this space online, and you're a creative, you're an academic, you've made a film, you also do public speaking. How did you move though into tech? Because I don't see programmer or hacker on your resume until recently.
Yeah, well, I'm not a programmer, but I think I've always been a hacker. And when I think of hacker, I think of someone who, really uses technology to make something new, right? Kind of pulling together from different things. Like I said, I'm a self-taught web developer, and that has been an important skill that I've used to not only develop my blog in the early 2000s, when all you had was like Blogger and some plugins. And if you knew, HTML and CSS, you could really make something awesome, right? Mm-hmm. So that was definitely part of my, not only like online development as developing my scholarly voice, but my technical voice. And also as a filmmaker, I think when we think of tech, we limit it to programming. And that's a problem because we never really talk about how, being able to have software literacy is part of tech, right? Mm-hmm. Being able to use these programs to tell our stories. And so I'm also a self-taught editor and filmmaker, and everything that I've done. Like, for example, when you watch Still Black, you see that I edited, I did the sound, I did, I was a cinematographer, and those things take technical skill that we don't really give legitimacy to or credibility to. Mm-hmm. And so that's important. So I've always had a technical background, but I really wanted to shift that. So I'm really working to shift what the idea of tech is, but I also living in the Bay Area, Silicon Valley, I guess, participating in tons of hackathons and tech events as a filmmaker, as an artist, as a scholar. I really got to thinking like, wow, this space is really awesome, for collaboration and, innovation and all these kind of buzzwords people in tech toss around. Mm-hmm. It's important. It would be great if I could, utilize this space in a different way than just, knowing these skills, but also trying to bring visibility to the community that I'm in. And so that's when I kind of devised Trans H4CK. So
is the goal to bring visibility of the existence of tech and the idea of technical literacy to the trans community, or is it to bring the visibility of the trans community into the tech space, or is it a little of both?
It's both. It's all of that. It's to, give trans people a representation of themselves, that we're there. We're early adopters of multiple types of technologies that I don't think we're included in those discussions of that, right? Mm-hmm. We're consumers of technology. So there's multiple angles in which my goal, with Trans Hack and the work that I do is trying to address. And also really focusing on how to funnel, resources to the community, right? I think, again, living here in Silicon Valley where there's so much wealth and so many, wealth given to people with, again, using a buzzword, innovative ideas. Our community is very innovative. We're brilliant. We're some of the most highly educated people in the country. If you look at our statistics, but we're also the most underemployed and unemployed and discriminated against. So why not really focus on a space in which there's so much possibility? And focus on the trans people who are part of that possibility and those who want to be included as well.
So you brought up an interesting point that the statistics, education statistics show that transgender people have advanced degrees, but again, have a high rate of unemployment, unfortunately high rate of homelessness, and the average income is very low. Why is that? Why are they so disenfranchised?
Discrimination. People, there aren't any, up until recently now, there's, President Obama about a few weeks ago signed an executive order to cover gender identity, and workplace protections, right? Mm-hmm. And so prior to that, there's still like 32 states where you can fire somebody for not only being trans, being gay, queer, whoever, and so without policy and legislation, I think, to protect people, it doesn't matter how amazing and brilliant you are, when people are legally allowed to discriminate against you, right? So there's that side. There's also just ignorance. People are ignorant. I think people fear a lot of the unknown, and though trans is very visible now and shifting so many perspectives and identities and trans is almost like a household, transgender at least is almost a household term now. And people are learning what cis is and cisgender and all these different uses of pronouns and things like that. It's great. That's also not translating into people hiring trans people or really, doing the work to figure out that, yeah, you do have a community of people who are just so highly educated, but because there's not enough, I guess, push to discuss that, it leads to disparity of all sorts. So,
yeah, I think that when in the early 90s, late 80s, when I was in high school, amongst my peers and peer groups, there was a lot of out there in the open discrimination against gays. And then this is just one example, but then when you started to see shows like Will and Grace and more gay people on television, fast forward 20 years and you have a group of young people who've grown up and seen that, and you can see while there's still bullying in schools, I have seen, at least in my kids' schools, people basically saying, "Hey, man, that's not cool. Like, we don't do that." They even joke about that on movies like 21 Jump Street, where a kid who went to high school in the 80s comes in and immediately finds the first gay kid and punches him in the face, thinking that would make him cool. But he missed out on 20 years of change and of progressiveness, both in the media and then that became an inappropriate thing for him to do. And that was joked about in this movie. But in the trans space, it's only been the last maybe 2 years when we've started to see transgendered people get recognized, for their work in movies. Like, for example, Lorraine Cox was on the cover of Time recently and is on Orange is the New Black. Suddenly that issue is coming to be in the forefront. Do you think, fast forward 20 years, that we'll see that same kind of sea change happen that we are beginning to see or have seen amongst the gay and lesbian space?
I hope not, because if it's like this in 20 years, that means we haven't made that much progress, right?
Right.
And so I think like images, women like Laverne Cox are so important, and Janet Mock and people like Kyler Broadus and all of these figures who are really putting, even myself, I always include myself in this kind of shifting of discussions through trans individuals and trans voices and advocacy. But yeah, it's definitely gaining the momentum. And that's great because, again, it brings up issues of how do we shift policy? How do we, hire more trans people? How do we even know that trans people even exist? Kind of things like that. How do we make services better? How do we produce, compassion amongst people so that they feel that they have some kind of human connection to trans people? all of those things I think are happening right now. And so hopefully in 20 years, a completely new, and it sucks to say that a completely new identity will be, people will like find some interest in trying to eradicate bigotry and hate surrounding that. But I think, this is definitely a trans moment, and I'm excited to be a part of it and see it happen. So.
Yeah, it's amazing. And you've been actually recognized more than just nationally. Of course, you fly all over the world speaking, but you were at the White House. I was following you on Instagram. Yes. And then I saw your invitation, and I saw some selfies with the president. And then, you kind of went dark for a minute there. And then you were back at the White House again. You went twice in a month?
Yeah, I went twice in a week.
In a week?
I flew... I did a red night to go. I was invited by the president to attend the LGBT reception, that he has in his house. It's so crazy. He has in his house. And I just one day was walking home and, got an email alert and checked it out. And I was like, this is like a joke. Like, why would the president invite me? That imposter syndrome people talk about a lot about that. Oh, yeah. I'm not worthy of being invited. And it's like, well, actually, Kortney, you've been doing decades of work. You are worthy of being invited to have your work honored and recognized by, the president of the United States. So, I went for that, but I also had another obligation prior to that. And that was the White House held its first, ever, LGBT Innovation Summit, which invited, LGBT entrepreneurs and people in tech and innovators across industries who are really focusing on creating solutions to all the problems that, the community experiences. And so I, as a representative of Trans H4CK, along with other founders of organizations, put our money and mouths together and filled up the auditorium at the White House with amazing trans and queer and lesbian and gay entrepreneurs, and had an amazing day of potential policy talks and also fireside chats with people and elevator pitches where people shared their work with one another to secure funding and, formulate relationships. And then we had an awesome reception afterwards, and it was just such an amazing time. So yeah, within 1 week I was in Washington, D.C. at the actual White House for 2 separate events. But I think the first one, hanging out with the president and drinking whiskey, was awesome. That was amazing. The second one was super cool because it was amazing to partner with other orgs and make sure trans people and their voices were represented at this summit. Mm-hmm. But, again, just being in the space, in the same room with the first Black president, as a Black trans man from Compton, is just, it's amazing to me. I'll never forget that day. So.
What does it feel like to have so many like-minded people in one space, like the density of people in your space of advocacy, trans people in one location, not just such an amazing location as the White House, but does that give you a sense that things are going to be okay? Does that give you energy and buoyancy when you're kind of feeling lonely or disconnected?
Totally. It's like those moments where, the world is pretty difficult, and we all have our issues, and we all struggle I think we're all struggling or working towards being good people and doing good things, no matter what industry we're in. But it's always important and beautiful and uplifting and energy recharging, or whatever you want to call it, to be in a room of people who have a similar goal and a similar idea of how to make our species better. Mm-hmm. Because then, there's still almost 7 billion other people who disagree with you, right? And mm-hmm. So it's beautiful to be in that space. It's uplifting. It makes you feel that your work matters in those times where you feel crazy and someone tells you it doesn't.
Yeah.
So definitely.
So the goal, of course, ultimately, whether it be for someone who's transgendered or someone who's cisgendered, like I am, is, I think, well said when we say life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. People should be able to go out there, do good work, receive a fair wage for that work, not be homeless, and feel generally, I think the best word is empowered in doing what they're doing. And that's what you're trying to do with Trans H4CK. And I understand that you had an event in Chicago recently?
Yes.
How did that go?
It went spectacular. It was a fantastic event. Trans H4CK launched last September. Actually, we'll be in existence a year this September. So we had our first event September 13th through the 15th of 2013. And it was amazing. We had about 40 plus hackers about 8 speakers, trans people who work in tech at Google, Apple. We had Janet Mock, who talked about her hashtag Girls Like Us. We had a wide variety of trans identities, and people came up with some amazing things. An app, a Yelp-like app where you can find resources and rate them. A social surveying app, website where you can lend your anonymous information to trans, research studies, which is important because there is a lack of data in so many of our lives. But a lot of trans people, because of privacy issues, don't feel comfortable being kind of research subjects for multiple reasons. And that's awesome. So things like that have kind of emerged from the first couple events, and we traveled to Las Vegas, just, really tap into what's happening into that startup scene there. And that was really awesome. And yeah, our last event was in Chicago a couple of months ago, and that was amazing because we partnered with the Trans 100. And so the winners of this particular hackathon were able to pitch their app in front of a live audience that was broadcast to the world, and in front of Laverne Cox, who was the guest speaker. So, and out of that came, I want to say 9 prototypes of multiple apps. One in particular, which was featured in Wired magazine, is an app called it's a mobile app called Transgress, and it's a content filtering app that allows you to access pages that are relevant to the trans experience that are perhaps blocked through certain servers or sites. For example, a lot of schools, elementary schools or whatever, if you're doing a search for transgender, it might be considered pornographic, because there is a lot of trans porn, as much as there's a lot of non-trans porn. However, because we're not yet a society that sometimes can separate trans from sexuality and pornography, those sites may be blocked, right? And so Transgress is an app where you can enter that site and it will replace words that are blocked with a symbol so you can access that site. And that's, it's a basic kind of idea, but it's really helpful, and it didn't exist before. And it's really fascinating. And I think that one of the beautiful things that TransHack is doing is allowing other trans developers to have their work showcased in a national and international audience in ways that haven't been done before. So that's really amazing. People have had their work again in Wired magazine and Wall Street Journal. We were mentioned in TechCrunch and all these other awesome sites where people who are not myself, but who are doing other types of amazing development in the field are getting shine. So I'm super proud of that, and that definitely needs to continue happening. I'm going to say one more thing about the Chicago event. One really cool thing that came out of it is that the winner not only being able to pitch in front of Laverne Cox, but into live audiences, but they developed it's called Rad Remedy, and it's a database where people can rate potential trans healthcare providers, which is awesome. And it's a database of healthcare providers that are specifically worked with trans individuals. There was all of this data that was sitting on the internet in a CSV file of surgeons or medical providers who worked with the trans community. It was just sitting there. And so this group took it and went through all the files and erased people who no longer practice or who had since passed on. So they updated the information. And now they've in the process of making an actual organization. They just got their actual, business license and everything last week. So they're an actual new trans-based organization that grew out of winning TransHack. And so things like that are just quite amazing, I think, in terms of the impact that TransHack has done, and not only shifting conversations of diversity, but actual producing and startup nonprofits, right? So it's quite awesome.
That's very empowering. I mean, that's the point. I think that there's a lot of people who might be thinking, gosh, why do trans people need their own hackathon? I don't have straight white guy hackathon. Why do I, well, we have those. They're called hackathons.
Exactly.
And, we do those things because they empower us. Why shouldn't, different slices of people who are interested in different things be able to create empowering tools that will help them? This is a weak parallel. It's hardly a parallel, so I hesitate to give the example, but I'm a type 1 diabetic. I take 3 or 4 different shots, injections every day to keep me alive. I'm on an insulin pump. I've got different implants. All of these things work together to keep me alive. And they are something, though, that it's not, you can't look at me and tell that I have this problem. But I interact with people a lot of times that hear diabetic, and then they start telling me things about my life and how I operate in order to, well, you can't have that cake, can you? Or, oh, well, my dad's, diabetic. I understand how that works. Even worse when those people are in a position of power or a position of medical power or a doctor. And I'm actually going to be speaking at a diabetes conference in front of a bunch of diabetes educators who are themselves not diabetic. And one of the things I'm going to talk about is that you are our allies, you are our helpers, but make no mistake, at 3 a.m. when I'm having a blood sugar issue, or for the last 20 years as I have lived the diabetic experience,
exactly,
I know more about this. You may have a master's in diabetes education. You're still not a diabetic. And that can apply to deaf communities, diabetes communities, multiple sclerosis, anyone who has a unique thing or multiple unique things. So when you get into the space of allies, there's this term allies, where someone is there to help the LGBTQ community. Are they more trouble than they're worth? I mean, are non-trans people trying to help trans people not required, not appreciated?
No, allies are always useful. I think the thing with allies is that a lot of people don't really, there's, multiple definitions of what it means to be an ally out there. There's multiple definitions of what power and privilege are. And I think that when there's any type of allyship or ally relationship, all those things need to be transparent. And transparency is not from the initial point of being like, I'm an ally to this community. There needs to be trust built. And so there's always these stumbling blocks, right? So it's not if allies are more trouble than they're worth. It's just that I think that I'm trying to be diplomatic with answering this question because people see me as exactly, as someone who critiques allies often. And I think that I am not one who critiques allies often. I think that I critique, again, what it means to be an ally and addressing, like what you're saying, like who has power. Because one can say, I can relate to your experience and I want to help your experience out. But then there's also allies who think, I'm going to speak for your experience. I know your experience better than you do. My best friend, such and such, or, I'm not, but I have access to. And I think it's one thing that allies have to remember, whichever community you're aligning yourself with, is that you're standing behind a community. You have their back, literally. You're not their front. And when you have someone's back, you're letting them lead. But they can turn around and ask you for help, right? They can be, you got my back. Let me ask you, you have resources because, so let me use your resources, but I got to lead still because I know this better than you. And so I think that that's an important way for allies to kind of position themselves. Remember that their voices are important and that they are very helpful, but that you have to allow others to lead, but that you can use your resources to help them become more efficient leaders, of course. So.
Yeah, I definitely, I appreciate that, that imagery, that, a line of individuals, marching forward to take control of their situation and their reality. And I'm behind them and they can turn around and call on me and I can be like, you can do it. Let's go. But I shouldn't be taking the sign and stepping in front of the line and saying, let's go everyone this way. And allies, though, they mean well, and not just allies, but also friends. It seems like there's this concept of microaggressions, and in the trans community, this idea of misgendering. And you wrote a piece for Model View Culture, and we actually had Shanley and some of the folks from Model View Culture on a couple of months ago, where people have misgendered you when meeting you for the first time. How do you deal with that, where this is clearly a person that means well, but they're really not meaning well right now?
Exactly. I guess the first step is for me to have that like 1 nanosecond of debating whether they mean well or if they're intentional. And I say that because a lot of people who follow my work, know who I am. And though I don't always say I'm trans, like that's not, but I think that, in some spaces people know that I'm transgender, right? And so upon meeting me in person, to deny me of the identity that I publicly represent myself, for people who say, oh, I follow your work and you do all this. If you follow my work, then I don't use, for lack of a better term, so don't be mad at me, people, feminine pronouns. And I'm using that with scare quotes, everybody. So I don't use that, right? I use he, him, Kortney. And that's been for quite some time now. And so sometimes I have to sit with myself and like, is it intentional? Because bigotry is intentional. I don't think it's subconscious, but I think there's also moments where people are just being intentionally malicious, right? And I'm not going to deny that from people who purposefully misgender trans people. But then there's also, there's people who are just ignorant. And so it hurts. But I also don't want it to happen again. So I have to step up and educate them when I don't want to, but educate them because it depends on my safety for one, and my dignity for, another, and just also being able to work with me in the future. I can't work with people who see me as somebody that I'm not. So.
Yeah, that is a difficult thing, I think, for people who are cisgender to remember that, sexuality and gender identity and these things are all different. And if if someone feels misgendered, then refer to them by the gender that they prefer to be referred to and move on with your life. It's pretty straightforward. I wanted to end on a discussion that you've got another business venture. I like that you said that you were a hacker, even though I said you mentioned you weren't a programmer. You've been basically hacking the system for years, not just whether it be film and speaking, but in business space. You have a new business venture.
Yes, after Trans H4CK, it was co-organized by Tiffany Michael, who's my co-founder of Black Star Media right now. But she co-organized Trans H4CK with me, and she was working at Dev Bootcamp Chicago at the time. After the amazingness that was Trans H4CK, she approached me and was like, I really want to work with you again. I'm thinking of, there needs to be a space specifically for folks of color to, learn and kind of acquire entrepreneurial tools, a different kind of space. I'm like, yeah, there isn't really, right? There's, we can go to websites and people give 5 tips and all of these different things, but there's really no space in which people of color see themselves reflected as educators of entrepreneurial curriculum, and as consumers of entrepreneurial curriculum, right? And so we're trying to address that problem because we really think it's important that education, that to really increase wealth, specifically in communities of color and particularly amongst Black folks, that education is important, but it's important for it to come from people who represent who you are, who look like you, right? And there's a number of studies that we can go into that shows that, a lot of people in tech talk about how diversity is important, and they spout off studies about how companies with more diverse, executive boards or whatever, make more money, right? I think the same thing goes in a different way with Black entrepreneurship. You have to really foster this diversity of Blackness, and represent an image of people of color where they are leaders, but they also educate one another, to really increase any type of sustainability in the community. So that's what we're focused on. And our company is called Black Star Media. And Black Star Media existed, it has been in existence over a decade, and all my film work has been produced under that. But now we're shifting it to really focusing on helping creative founders do their thing. So
cool. So that encompasses interactive. It's a complete kind of full service agency almost.
Yeah, it's a complete full service agency. We're doing research about Black entrepreneurship. We're doing online and on-site courses. We did our soft launch July 28th, where I gave a course about how people with research-based degrees can build a public image, right? A public brand. Because many of us in the academy, we follow this pathway of fighting for tenureship or we write, we publish, we do all these things. And then we have these degrees. We can't get a job because of the draconian tenure system. And also because of racism, right? Where we also have people who decide our tenure who don't look like us. And no matter how hard we work, academic success is not afforded to all of us. And it's also a hostile environment for many of us to be in when I'm talking specifically about the academy, right? Mm-hmm. And so many of us seek outside, like I want to be an entrepreneur, but I don't know how to. And the amazing thing is that we've already spent all these years developing our writing skills, developing our research skills, developing our skills of persuasion and argumentation, which are so integral to being any type of entrepreneur. So our seminar was based on that and really focusing on, again, research-based degrees and how you can, become an entrepreneur with your degree. So we're really trying to shift what it means to be a Black entrepreneur. And again, like I said before, hacking the system, hacking education. So
that's fantastic. Well, thanks so much for chatting with me today.
Thank you.
We will put up in the show notes links to Dr. Ziegler's site and transhack.org. You can learn all about Dr. Ziegler's work online. This has been another episode of Hansel Minutes. We'll see you again next week.